Welcome to the Bible Made Clear. This week I want to do something just a little bit different. I'm going to do a short video and point to another video, but I want to talk to you about where we're at in our American history. We are coming up to a very important election, and to be quite frank with you and to cut to the chase, this election will be determined by Christians. Christians have historically shied away from dealing with any kind of government issues, which is not biblical, and it's silly because they want to utilize all that the government has for them. You want the police to protect you. You want the firemen to put out the fire in your houses. You want to comfortably live and have your children live under the protections of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and yet at the same time you want, many of you, not all of you obviously, but if you are either not registered and deciding not to vote because you have some conscience problem and not finding a candidate that you're in love with, that's a personal problem, but that is an issue that you cannot use to disobey the scriptures. And the scriptures teach us. I did a video on voting, a few weeks back, and talked about James 4:17. If you know to do right and you don't do it, it's sin. It is sinful to not deal with voting. Look, God created government. When Noah got off the boat, he had Noah. God gave him the instructions to govern over everybody else. He only had his family at the beginning, but then obviously it graduated to other people. And what was the main goal of his governing over others? God only told him two things. Number one, you need to protect life. That is the role of government. It is to create safety and security and protect life. And Paul deals with this at the beginning of 1 Timothy chapter 2. But the point is that if somebody murdered somebody else, then they forfeited their own life. You could not just go out and murder people. And so God gave Noah the responsibility of capital punishment because those people that would murder somebody else, take their life innocently, take an innocent life, they were accountable to God, and God would use Noah, which is a human being exercising that authority over others given by God, to extract their life here on earth. And the only other thing was you can eat what you want, because things had changed with the animals. But God never changed government all the way into the New Testament, Romans 13, but he did refine it and make it much more exact under the law only for the nation of Israel. Their capital punishment requirements were much more stringent, and so Israel was kind of a model for the rest of us. But there was tremendous accountability, responsibility within that. But the point is that God established government, and he wants his people to have the proper connection to it. Now, maybe you don't want to run for office, and that's fine if you don't feel called to do that, but you need to vote. If you don't vote, you are shunning a responsibility that God has given you. Now, in this interview with Frank Turek and Bill Federer, Federer will go through history and put things together for you in a way that it will connect with the Bible and it will be very applicable to where we are at today. Now, before we do that, very briefly, I want to look at, I don't know where you get your news, but this guy, John Solomon, he has a website called Just the News, and that's all he gives you, Just the News. Because if you're watching mainstream media news, the problem is it's not news. What that is that is a commercial for the owners of the news companies, okay? So all these people do is they repeat the same thing. It doesn't matter which major network you watch, They all have the same sound bites saying the same thing from 5 different angles, because it's the same owners, and basically they're doing a commercial for what the owners want put out. It's entirely jaded. It is not accurate. It has a severe jaundice to it, and it falls to the left side of the political spectrum, to an extreme, actually. So anyways, having said that, Just the News had this article on October 7th. Millions of Christians not planning to vote this November could shape election, and then there's a study regarding it, and he goes through it. It's a short article, you can read it, but it talks about the problem of Christians essentially not voting. And we're going to decide this election whether you like it or not, and there's only a few weeks to go, so Christians need to get out and vote. Now I'm going to play this short clip from the interview with Frank Turek and Bill Federer. It's only a couple of minutes, and then I'll come back and then we'll talk about it just for a minute, and then I will leave the link for that interview over my shoulder here or to the side so that you can watch it. But here's the couple of minutes I just want you to see. Let's see.
But here's God actually saying, if you close your eyes to this kind of evil, God says, at least to the ancient Israelites, I will set my face against him and his family and cut them off from the people together. God does not like it when we allow evil to go unspoken of, when we don't resist evil at all. The question is, where does this idea come from that we can just be silent when evil is being done? And the answer, of course, is in history, and our great friend Bill Federer can tell us. Now, Bill, you just wrote a brand new book. It's very up to date. It's got quotes from this year in it, 2024. It's called Silence Equals Consent: The Sin of Omission. First of all, why did you decide to write it? And then we're going to get into the history of why Christians think they can sit idly by.
Well, George Barna has been doing polling and seeing that only a quarter of the Christians vote. Right? There's different numbers. Some have 80 million Christians, half are registered and half are not registered. And of those that are registered, only half of those vote. So you're down to a quarter. So out of 80 million, maybe 20 million vote. And when you have many states, their elections are determined by very small margins, like 80,000 votes, when you have millions of Christians not voting. And so the devil's first goal is to get people to not become Christian. If he fails and they somehow get to become Christian, his next goal is to isolate them so they don't infect anybody else. Get them to not do anything. Get them, in the Middle Ages, it was get them to join a monastery and even take vows of silence so you won't even talk to anybody, right? It was this idea that just focus on your own personal relationship so much that it's only personal. And so with that in mind, I decided to study, where did this idea come from of Christians not being involved? I mean, literally, how can you get godly people be in agreement to letting ungodliness reign? That's a pretty interesting trick the devil's pulled. And so I first go through the 1600s, and we talk about the Puritans, and then I go through the 1700s, and we talk about the Pietists. It's actually one of the first religious controversies in America, the old lights versus the new lights. And with that, we have to start off with the Puritans. And I go through how the Puritans were unique in that they pioneered how to have a government without a king.
So you have an idea here of where they're coming from. It's a tremendous interview. It's a little over an hour. Please watch the whole thing. If you have people you know that are Christians that are not planning on voting, please forward this to them. Ask them to watch it, because they just don't understand what's happening. And you know, sadly, we have pastors somehow that are trying to tell people in their congregations that if they're voting, their trust is in the government and not God, and it's not spiritual. Well, quite frankly, their advice is not spiritual because it's not biblical. And I think we need to understand that the Bible not only tells us that government comes from God, and then we need to have that respect for it, but we also need to realize that the places in the Bible where the secular governments are occurring, and Israel or the church is dealing with any of them, they utilize them. Now, we live in a country where, you know, this election is going to determine the course of our country. And I'm not overstating that, all right? Because right now you have severely divided parties. You have one side, a party of death and destruction. They're into murdering children. They have no respect for life. They have no respect for the living people. You see what's happened. The crime rates are astronomical. They pretend that they're lower because they stopped prosecuting low-level crimes. Look, my wife was at a store a few weeks ago, and there were people, and this is in my own state, right? And this is a blue state, obviously, which is why they let it happen. But, you know, people were walking out with stuff, and she said, why are you letting them do that? And the store employee said, well, we're not allowed to do anything about it. You know, there's no sense in calling the police because the police aren't going to respond to it because they will not prosecute low-level thievery, drug use, you know, trespassing, many times coming into your house. It's crazy, okay? It's absolutely crazy. And so because you remove those as crimes, it makes it appear as though there's less crime because you're not recording the actual crimes that are occurring. It's just fudging the numbers. I mean, there's no mystery to this. But anyways, look, I hear Christians saying, well, you know, I don't like either candidate. Honestly, who really cares? Does it really matter? You're not going to marry them. You don't like a lot of things about a lot of people, but you still stay friends with people that you don't really like a lot of things about. That's not the issue. The issue is if you don't vote and the election falls to the same crowd that's in control right now, then what's going to happen is when things deteriorate and your children and your grandchildren are affected by it, don't turn around and say, why is God allowing this? Because, like Peter says, judgment begins with the household of God. And if we're going to let this happen on our watch, then we can't turn around and either A, blame God, or just say, well, I guess that's God's will. No, God's will is not to ruin people's lives. God's will is to save them. But if we allow things to go in a direction where we're no longer under the protections of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, if we don't have those as documents that the ruling administration abides by, then what's going to end up happening is that you might as well move to China, Russia, or North Korea because you'll have the same rights there. You won't be able to preach the gospel. You won't be able to have any of the freedoms that you have. So, you know, to say, well, I don't like politics, I don't like to get involved, it doesn't matter. You are involved because you enjoy many of the policies of what you call politicians, the people that establish the type of government that we live under, our founding fathers. And if you let that go, then you're just going to let it go to the type of government that you don't want to be under when you have a chance to make a contribution to decide which way. Look, abortion should be a very simple no-brainer in this election. If for no other reason, you vote the party that certainly is more likely to protect life than the party that has made it clear that they're not interested in it. I mean, who wants to stand before Jesus Christ? Do you want to stand before Jesus Christ and say, yeah, well, I didn't really want to get involved because I didn't like the candidate, so I really wasn't interested in at least trying to save the lives of innocent babies, or I wasn't interested in trying to put somebody in office that had a policy that would help people put food on the table so that their kids or their grandkids don't starve, or put an administration into the White House that would at least try to gain some measure of control in public schools so the kids aren't taught nonsense and just absolute blasphemies, as well as unscientific stupidities, and then at the same time have the violence rise, and then it's not safe for people, for women, for children to be out there. This is madness. It's an insanity. I don't know what the issue is among Christians, but if your pastor is telling you to not vote, or he thinks you're being involved in the government or any aspect of government is not spiritual, your pastor is not spiritual. They do not understand the Bible. I don't know where they get their understanding. And look, it's this same mentality that we're seeing today with this kind of weird, carnality that they're calling spirituality, that all of a sudden, we're rejecting Israel. What's that all about? Look, we reject Israel. It'll be because the church rejects Israel. If the church does not vote the party into office that is going to support Israel, that's on us. You can't look at a politician, whether they're president or any other high office, and say, well, that's their fault. No. If we didn't vote for them, then we helped put them there. If we didn't vote against them, we helped put them there. We need to be voting for the person that's gonna, and the party that is gonna support saving babies' lives, supporting Israel, some really fundamental things like making sure that the economy is functional for people that are struggling financially, and that the streets are safe. Not defunding the police. And it drives me crazy. We listen to these candidates, and they say, no, after they defund the police for almost 4 years, they say, no, we didn't defund the police. And it's like, look around. Look at the blue states, especially, and even some of the red states. The problem is that though they didn't from the front remove police, what they did was they came in through the back. I see it around the towns in my own state. They come in through the back door, and what they do is they start taking roles that policemen have and giving it to non-police people, which means they don't need as many police, so the roster gets smaller. The roster gets smaller, so then when they need more police, well, they just don't have them. I mean, this is so insidious, and yet people are just kind of dizzy blind to it. So, look, I can go on and on. I don't want to. I've already gone longer on this video than I wanted to, and but I want to just try to express how important this particular election is. And look, there's been really one close attempt and two non-close at former President Trump. And whether you like him or you don't like him is not the issue. Think about what's going on. He's been saved already from 3 that we know of. What other president or former president in the history of our country has faced so many assassination attempts? None. So it's the grace of God that he hasn't been killed. And so you need to look at that from a Christian perspective and start to ask, why? Is God trying to throw a hint here? Regardless of whether you like or don't like his personality or mean tweets or whatever you want to say about him, that's not the concern here. The concern is the party that he represents and the policies of that party, because quite frankly, even if you don't like him, the policies that he holds and that he had in office when he was in from 2016 to 20, they were beneficial, and they were much more biblical leaning than anything you would have saw on the other side. So, look, if you're not voting, you're contributing to a loss for the Conservative Party, and you're helping the Liberal Party get in. You'll have to give account to Jesus Christ for it. I'm not going to have to give an account, though it is frustrating when I find out the kind of weird views that Christians have. And hey, if you think I'm wrong, send me an email, BibleMadeClear@gmail.com. I'll answer your email. If you think that for some reason that voting is like an evil thing to do, that's like the minimal thing. Nobody's asking you to run for office. People will do what they feel called to do, but at the same time, that is an obedient response to a responsibility and accountability to God that we've uniquely been given in this country. And again, Turek and Federer will go through it. I think it's a big value for you. So look, hey, maybe you've shut the channel off by now. I don't know. But if you haven't and you've stuck with me, please click on the link and then go watch that video. The interview is fascinating. It'll be an education that you probably have not had after you listen to Bill Federer. And I'd recommend that you get on his mailing list because he sends out some great stuff. And obviously, I recommend Frank Turek too. So both good guys, a big advantage for you. And until next time, may God richly bless you as you continue to study his word, and make sure you study his word to realize how important it is to vote this November.